Ever feel like your immune system's playing both sides? Like one minute it's fighting the good fight, and the next it's waving the white flag.
Hmm. Yeah, I see what you mean.
Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today.
Oh, it's gonna be good.
It really is. We're talking about PVR, a molecule that's basically the double agent of the immune system, especially when it comes to cancer.
Double agent. How so?
Get this, depending on who it bumps into, it can either tell your body to slam on the brakes or hit the gas in the fight against cancer.
Whoa, wait a minute. Back up. We're talking about one single molecule that can do both those things.
You got it. It's like having a key that can both lock and unlock a door, all depending on which way you turn it.
Now that is fascinating. And what makes PVR even more interesting is that it wasn't even originally discovered in the context of cancer.
Really? So where did it come from?
Believe it or not, it was first identified as the receptor for poliovirus.
Polio. Now that's a blast from the past. I mean, that's amazing, right? The connections between different areas of biology.
It really is. Talk about interconnectedness, right? But while the polio connection is definitely cool, what we're really interested in today is PVR's role in our immune system, especially when it comes to battling cancer.
Okay, so let's talk cancer. We know cancer cells are sneaky little devils. They're like masters of disguise, always trying to outsmart our immune system.
Absolutely. And you know what? PVR is right there in the thick of it, acting like a switch on the surface of our cells.
A switch, huh? So how does that work?
It all depends on which other molecule it interacts with. It's like PVR is the key, and it needs to find the right lock to unlock a specific immune response.
Okay, I think I'm following. So depending on which lock it opens, it can either tell the immune system to attack or to just completely ignore the cancer cell.
Precisely. One of these locks is a receptor called DNAM-1. Think of DNAM-1 as the on switch for our immune cells, specifically those killer T cells and NK cells, the ones that take out the trash.
NK cells, those are the natural killer cells, right? They sound pretty badass.
They are. Now, when PVR links up with DNAM-1, it's like giving those NK cells a jolt of energy and pointing them straight at the cancer cells. They go into overdrive.
Talk about a power couple, but you said there's an off switch too. How does that work?
Right, so this is where it gets even more wild. PVR also interacts with another receptor called TIGIT.
TIGIT, okay. And what does TIGIT do?
Well, think of it like this TIGIT is like slapping a camouflage cloak on those cancer cells, making them practically invisible to the immune system.
Whoa, that's crazy. So PVR is either activating the immune system or suppressing it. No wonder cancer is such a tough nut to crack.
It's definitely a constant tug of war. And this is precisely why researchers are so excited about these new therapies that specifically target that TIGIT interaction.
So we're talking about blocking the off switch, essentially cutting the brakes on the immune system so it can finally go after those cancer cells.
That's the idea. And the best part, these therapies are designed to keep that on signal, the one with DNAM-1, completely intact.
So it's like releasing the brakes and hitting the gas at the same time?
Exactly. And it gets even more interesting. Researchers are looking at ways to boost these effects even further.
Okay, now you've got me on the edge of my seat. Tell me more.
So imagine this. We've got these incredible new therapies that can block that TIGIT off switch, right? But what if we could also give the immune system a boost at the same time?
Okay, so we're talking about hitting cancer with a 1-2 punch.
Exactly. Combination therapies, that's where the real magic happens. And one really exciting avenue is combining these new anti-PVR therapies with another type of immunotherapy you might have heard of, PD-1, PD-L1 inhibitors.
Oh yeah, those are already making waves in cancer treatment, aren't they?
They really are. But unfortunately, they don't work for everyone. And let's face it, some cancers are just sneakier than others. See, PD-1, PD-L1 inhibitors work by taking down a different set of brakes that cancer cells use.
Okay, so a different set of brakes. I'm trying to picture this.
Think of it like this. If the TIGIT interaction is like cutting the parking brake, PD-1, PD-L1 inhibitors are like cutting the emergency brake.
Got it. So by combining them with anti-PVR therapies, you're essentially cutting multiple brake lines.
You're catching on quickly. It's all about synergy, two therapies working together to deliver a knockout punch.
I like the sound of that. But are there other ways to give those cancer cells a run for their money? We were talking about NK cells earlier, weren't we?
Absolutely. Those NK cells are like the special forces of our immune system. And researchers are looking at ways to combine anti-PVR therapies with treatments that specifically amp up their activity.
So not only are we releasing the brakes, but we're also giving our best fighters even more firepower.
Precisely. It's all about giving the immune system every possible advantage in this fight.
This is seriously cool stuff. It sounds like we're on the verge of some major breakthroughs in cancer treatment.
The potential is definitely there. Preclinical studies have been incredibly promising, and early phase clinical trials are underway to see how these therapies perform in people.
So they're making sure these therapies are safe and effective for real patients. What are they hoping to learn from these trials?
Well, figuring out the optimal dosage is crucial. How much is enough? How often should it be administered? Too little might be ineffective, but too much could lead to unwanted side effects.
It's about finding that sweet spot, right?
Exactly. They're also closely monitoring the long-term immune responses. Ideally, we want these treatments to lead to long-lasting remission, where the immune system learns to keep those cancer cells in check even after the treatment is over.
So it's like training the immune system to be on high alert, a watchdog that never sleeps.
Precisely. And of course, research into those synergistic effects with other immunotherapies is ongoing, trying to identify the most effective combinations for different types of cancer.
This is all incredibly promising, but I have to ask, are there any roadblocks or challenges when it comes to developing these anti-PVR therapies?
That's a really important question. As with any new area of research, especially when we're dealing with something as complex as the human immune system, there are always hurdles to overcome.
So what are some of the challenges researchers are facing?
Well, one of the biggest challenges stems from PVR's dual nature, as we talked about before. We need to make sure the therapy specifically targets the PVR TIGIT off switch without interfering with the PVR DNAM1 on switch.
So it's like trying to disarm a bomb, one wrong move, and
You don't want to trigger the wrong reaction, that's for sure. That's why researchers are working on developing incredibly sophisticated antibodies that are much more precise in their targeting.
so it's all about developing sharper tools for a very delicate operation. What other obstacles are scientists working to overcome?
Another major hurdle is the sheer diversity of cancer itself. What works wonders for one type of cancer might not have the same effect on another. Plus, the amount of PVR on different tumor types can vary quite a bit.
So a one-size-fits-all approach isn't going to work.
Exactly. Every cancer is unique, and so is every patient. That's why those clinical trials are so essential. They help us determine which cancers and, more importantly, which patients are most likely to benefit from these anti-PVR therapies.
It's about finding the right tool for the job, the right key for the right lock. Makes sense. Are there any other challenges on the horizon that researchers are tackling?
One of the biggest challenges in medicine is translating those exciting findings from the lab, those aha moments, into tangible treatments for real patients. What works like a charm in a petri dish might not always translate seamlessly to the human body.
Right, because we're a lot more complex than a lab experiment. How are scientists addressing that challenge?
Through rigorous clinical trials, of course, but also through meticulous data analysis and continuous fine-tuning of their approaches. It's a journey of constant learning and improvement.
That's reassuring to know. So even though there are challenges, it sounds like we're making significant progress in understanding and harnessing the power of PVR for cancer treatment.
Absolutely. This is a field that's evolving at an incredible pace, and the potential is truly enormous. I'm very optimistic about where this research will take us.
Me too. Now, as we look to the future of anti-PVR therapies, what are some key takeaways our listeners should keep in mind?
Well, first and foremost, I think it highlights just how powerful and complex our immune systems truly are. The more we can unravel the intricacies of how they operate, the better equipped we'll be to fight diseases like cancer.
Knowledge is power. What else?
I think it's important to remember that these anti-PVR therapies represent a whole new way of thinking about cancer treatment. Instead of directly attacking the cancer cells, we're essentially harnessing the body's own defenses to fight back. This is a radical departure from traditional therapies, and the potential is truly revolutionary.
It's like we're finally learning to speak the immune system's language, right? Okay, any last thoughts for our listeners before we wrap things up? I love that. It gets me thinking. We've spent this whole episode talking about PVR's potential role in the fight against cancer. But what if its influence goes even further than that?
Oh, now you've got me intrigued. What are you thinking?
Well, we've established that PVR is like this finely tuned switch, right? It can either activate or suppress our immune response. What if this on and off mechanism isn't just crucial for fighting off external threats like those sneaky cancer cells? What if it's also vital for regulating our entire immune system?
Wow, that's a really interesting thought. And you know what? You might be onto something. Because if you think about it, our immune system has to be able to tell the difference between what's harmful and what's not. right? It needs to be able to distinguish between foreign invaders and our own cells.
Exactly. Otherwise, our bodies would be waging war on themselves all the time and we'd be dealing with all sorts of autoimmune disorders.
Precisely. So it's entirely possible that PVR plays a part in teaching our immune system how to strike that delicate balance,
Yeah.
that balance between mounting a full-blown attack and knowing when to stand down.
Right. Because tolerance is just as important as defense, isn't it?
Absolutely. And this opens up a whole new avenue of research, doesn't it? What if we could unlock the secrets of how PVR regulates immune responses? Could we then use that knowledge to develop therapies for things like autoimmune diseases?
Yeah.
Because let's face it, those are incredibly tough to treat.
It's amazing when you think about it, right? And, it's funny you should mention that because I've even seen some research hinting at a potential link between PVR and inflammatory conditions. So who knows, maybe one day we'll be able to harness the power of this one tiny molecule to treat not only cancer, but a whole range of immune-related diseases.
Wouldn't that be incredible?
Oh.
It just shows you how much we still have to learn about the inner workings of our own bodies. PVR, this molecule that we first discovered as the receptor for poliovirus, might just hold the key to revolutionizing how we approach human health.
It's mind-blowing, really. It just goes to show sometimes the most groundbreaking discoveries come from the most unexpected places.
Exactly. And who knows what other secrets PVR is hiding? What other mysteries are waiting to be uncovered?
I, for one, am incredibly excited to find out. But for now, I think that's all the time we have for today's deep dive.
This was a fascinating discussion.
It really was. And you know me, I always like to leave our listeners with something to ponder. So here's a little food for thought. The next time you hear about a new scientific discovery, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant it might seem, remember that it just might hold the key to unlocking some of the biggest mysteries of human health.
So true.
So to all our listeners out there, keep asking those questions, stay curious, and until next time, happy diving.